must tell you, I'm quietly nervous. We're one day away from streaming live with what is, for all intents and purposes, the first new radio station of its kind, because most of the FM stations that came along in recent times are, of course, music stations, but this is going to be a talk station. We will be, taking baby steps. I have to keep my powder dry to a certain extent so that I've got lots of interesting things to talk to you about tomorrow. But if you want to join us, it'll be live streaming from 9 o'clock, and you simply go to jeremycordo.com, and my understanding is that it'll be right there. And you press the play. Should be a big red button, I think, on your screen, on your telephone or your computer or your iPad or however you do it. You see, I'm still feeling my way at this end as well as the other end. But it's certainly interesting. Challenging? Yes. Frightening? Yes. I'm used to having sort of a kind of an infrastructure around, with a radio station. And this is on my dining room table. And the wonderful Tony Denton, who set this whole thing up, brilliant man. And Pete, will you be there?
Oh, yes.
Oh, God, yes. Okay. Peter Clayton will be there. At the moment, he's behind the camera. And I'll certainly be there. Maybe I should bring a glass of wine with me. I know it's 9 o'clock in the morning, but, Dutch courage? Something? I don't know. Maybe green tea. Green tea will do. Anyway, it'll be a very interesting moment in my life. And we'll just see where it goes. The phone number for the show, I'm sure you've got that. Pete, you're going to put that up at the end of the program?
Yes.
We'll put that up on the garage door at the end of this show. And you can feel free to call in any time you like. And if I can't get to you, we don't have a switchboard, of course. It's a mobile phone. The call will come in, and hopefully you'll leave a number, and we'll call you back. But I'll probably be chatting about something and be very happy to press the button that puts you to air. And unlike 5DN or 5AA, where I was of late until I was sacked, unlike that, this is a show that will go worldwide. Because I don't know. Pete, you can fill us in. We've got listeners, not many, 2 or 3 in South America, the Philippines,
Yes.
South Africa, America.
USA and Canada.
And Canada.
Yeah.
America and Canada.
I think it's 4 countries in South America: Brazil, Peru. Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of countries in South America, but I mean, the thing that boggles my mind is, how would they find us in the court of public opinion? How would they find that? Why would they go looking in the first place? I've got no idea, but I don't quibble. I think that's wonderful. Not that much of what I say is relevant to South America or South Africa or even, indeed, the United States of America. But I guess there's a certain curiosity about what happens in other places. I get that. I get that. Anyway, it's a brave new world. One, as I said, with which I have some fear, but I'm also amazingly excited by the possibilities as to where this little program on jeremycordo.com live on a Friday will take us. Now, I don't want to, on one hand, I don't want to take up too much time promoting tomorrow, but I also want to keep my powder dry and have lots of interesting things to talk to you about tomorrow. Because the 3-hour program, now we've got no news, and there are no commercials. Well, no, let me stand corrected. Tony Denton has collected over the years. He's a bit of a collector as well. He's my next door neighbour. He has collected some of the classic commercials from the radio that, well, I would think you and I grew up with here in Adelaide, and there are a few national ads as well. So he's going to pop those in. But by and large, it's going to be just a very straightforward program with what ends up in the news of the day and on the telephone. We're thinking about guests for the first show. Leave that with me. It's a work in progress. I mean, it's very difficult, because how do you actually say to somebody, somebody interesting, I mean, come around and sit down with me at the dining room table. We're doing a talk show. It sounds a bit weird. And I would expect, I don't know, I've got a few people in mind, I would half expect most of them to hang up in my ear. But anyway, we'll see what develops there. But it's certainly interesting. So look out for the number, which will be on the garage door when this segment today, the Court of Public Opinion, finishes. And I hope you'll tune in, jeremycordeaux.com, tomorrow. What I'm thinking of doing, without taking up too much time, what I'm thinking of doing is to keep the Facebook thing like this going for a little while, and then move to the podcast. But ultimately, if Friday goes well, we can move it to 2 days a week. And ultimately, we just have what we have on the Friday until it gets to be more accepted or more widely known or whatever. We can just put that up as our daily podcast. Anyway, the whole thing is pregnant with possibilities. But thank you for your support. Thank you for your comments. I see a whole lot of new names that I haven't seen before popping up, making remarks about the program. I'm still amazed with the things I say that I have never had anyone, and I hear all sorts of negative things about social media, being unsocial media, I feel very heartened by the fact that no one has been insulting or savage, unkind. I don't know what I've been in the media long enough not to have anything but a thick skin. So don't worry. Today, well, not so much today, but yesterday, the latest quarterly CPI figures, which are much more reliable than the monthly figures that we're used to, those CPI figures came out with some good news. The inflation rate is down. It's down to 6%. There's a lot of, I don't know, there's how do they call it? Underlying or core inflation, which has got to be looked at and taken into consideration as well, because what they do is to take out those volatile items in one's weekly shopping basket, if you like. So take those out and you get the underlying or core inflation rate. But on the surface, we have the inflation rate of this country heading in the right direction. That's good. The Reserve Board Bank, or the Reserve Bank Board, meets next week. And all I can say is that it's certainly taken the pressure off an upward movement. I mean, it's been 12 months, and if they were to put the interest rates up, it would be 13 upward movements in 12 months, which is hard, or really hard. But at 6%, the inflation rate is still twice what it should be. The band that the Reserve Bank are always interested in aiming at is 2 to 3%. But they clearly don't want to create a recession. The government does not want to create a recession. A soft landing is what they want. It's what we all want. So they should do everything very slowly, very gradually. Remembering, of course, that historically interest rates are always, in Australia, between 5 and 7%. That's the average over the many, many years. That's taking into account, of course, Keating's 18 to 22% if you were in business. I think the interest rate on your house was about 18%, and if you were in business, the bank was charging you a business rate of 22%. I remember the days well. Almost killed me. But we survived. But I just still always wonder at these people who are complaining at an interest rate of 4.1 when I know how hard it is when you get 22%. Anyway, everything is stable, running along nicely. Unemployment is historically a 50-year low. But I understand it's not always comfortable, even with an interest rate of 4.1%. I do understand. But it is the real world. But the Reserve Bank board, I'm not sure about the other board members, but the chairman, the governor of the Reserve Bank, is on about $1 million a year. $1 million a year does a lot to insulate you from the real world. There's a lot said, of course, about the voice. Maybe the Reserve Bank could do with a housewife's voice. You know, people who actually go to the supermarket and have to fill the basket, knowing that at the other end, where you get to the checkout, it might be you have to give things back. The real world, not always a comfortable place. I'm convinced, by the way, I don't want to be cynical, but I'm convinced that in the next little while, the government is going to announce that the cost, speaking of the cost of living, nothing more important in that particular basket than bread, the government will announce the cost of grain, Australian grain, wheat, barley, corn, will go through the roof. Because, why? Oh, the war in Ukraine. Whoa, yes, wow. The Russians have effectively blocked the export, mostly to poor African countries, by the way, which will produce a global shortage. Prices will jump, yes. With Russia's ban on the safe passage of the produce, there will be a global shortage. And that's to be expected, sadly. But I'm just waiting for this government to tell us that the cost of bread in Australia will double, triple, because of the war in Ukraine. Like the overseas cost of gas was no excuse for high prices of gas in Australia. We are also self-sufficient in grain production. More than self-sufficient. You know, we produce enough food in Australia to feed 75 million people. So please, let's not let them pull that one again. We have a media who will not stand up to the government and ask you, well, ask them on your behalf some of these hard questions, but I promise you that here in the Court of Public Opinion, we will be on it in a flash. This is trivial by comparison, but the indestructible bed. Have you seen that commercial, Pete?
No.
The indestructible bed. Apparently it's made of steel. Doesn't sound particularly comfortable, but anyway. The indestructible bed. If you've seen the ad on television, I don't know how comfortable or how expensive it is. It's the relevance of the ad that I question. This brand comparison test, where they lift up the two beds 10 metres and then they drop them. Why? I mean, what's the point? How many of us will lift up our beds 10 metres and drop them? I mean, I know it's only a small point, but really, I don't know. Don't really know. Anyway, again, let me say thank you for viewing the Court of Public Opinion. I'll leave you with some little dates for which we remember the day, but I mean, you might find 1,000 other reasons to remember the day. The Theatre Royal in Sydney opens. That was in 1985. Oh, well, this was Cats, wasn't it? This was the refurbished Theatre Royal. $3 million to produce Cats. I never went to see Cats. I just don't know why anybody did. Maybe you got to be into Cats, I don't know. The first colonists arrived in Kingscote, Kangaroo Island. Maybe that was in 1836. Maybe this, in fact, today should be declared South Australia's birthday, because that's when the first colonialists arrived. And I don't know what it was that turned them away from Kangaroo Island, because it would have been a pretty attractive place to see and to think about one's future on. Beautiful place. Christopher Dean was born. Oh yes, he used to skate with Jane Torval, didn't he? 1958 he was born. Geoffrey Hart arrived in Australia. He was the first judge of the New South Wales Supreme Court, 1814. Okay. Dennis Ralston was born in California, former US tennis player. James Mason died. He was 75. He died in Lucerne in Switzerland in 1984 on this day. The first flight of the world's first jet-propelled aircraft, the Comet. This day in 1947. John Laws worked his last show at 2UW in Sydney. Sir Philip Lynch was born in Melbourne, 1933. When did John finish that show? 1979. Korean armistice was signed in 1953. First volumes of the Costigan Royal Commission were delivered to the government in 1982. That turned the world upside down. Icehouse was in concert at Theberton Theatre in 1984. Anyway, if you remember the day for any reason, I hope it's going to be a great one. You remember it for your special reasons. Thank you for viewing the Court of Public Opinion. We'll be with you from my dining room table live tomorrow at 9 o'clock. JeremyCordeaux.com should get you right there, and I'm told there's a big red button and you press it and it says play or live or something like that. And coming up, if you want to join us, have a little look at the closing moments of this podcast or posting, and you will see the telephone number. So thank you for viewing. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton and I'll be back tomorrow around the dining room table. Thank you. Bye for now. Believe in yourself.
Hi Australia, my name is Tila Reid.
I was part of the constitutional dialogue process.
Tila has been there in the heart of creating a framework for rethinking our constitution.
Referendum engagement group member Tila Reid.
You have all these remarkable people like Thomas Mayer
and Taylor Reid.
We have to understand this concept of the voice is the first step in redistributing power.
There does need to be these tough decisions and reparations for what First Nations peoples have lost. This notion of reconciliation, it's not enough.
The voice is burning. We begin to demolish the system that continue to oppress us.
All these remarkable people.
What we need is to get back to these radical roots of the Communist Party. It's going to be very difficult once we succeed for a government to ignore this voice. It will be powerful.
Authorised by Matthew Sheehan, Advance Australia, Canberra.